Hello everyone, and welcome. My name is Brittany Lewis. I'm a professional graphic designer and illustrator, and Sundays is the day that I work on my dream project, the Cosmic Gateways Tarot. My lips a little chapped. Hold on one second. Alright, so Sundays is the day that I work on my dream project, the Cosmic Gateways Tarot, and this week we're picking right back up with the Four of Wands. But before we get into this particular illustration or get back into this illustration, please do me a huge favor and hit the thumbs up if you like to see live sort of artist processes. If you would like just to support my channel, that would do me a huge favor. And if you would like to see more live videos such as this one, be sure to hit the subscribe button. So we're picking back up with the Four of Wands where we left off. So last week we left off with the bushes, and a few days ago I went ahead and finished creating and rendering out the bushes for this card. It did take me a little while, but I'm glad that it did. If we zoom in here, we see that it was lots of random, or what appears to be random, squiggles and all of the things that makes this bush sort of look like a bush. Once we zoom out, we're going to pick back up with the background, with the idea of just kind of taking care of all of the things that fall under this symmetry ruler. Now I'm using the symmetry ruler just to kind of cut down the workload for myself, because what I create and draw on one side of the canvas will show up on the other side of the canvas, and it just kind of makes things quicker, right? So I've already began to work on the vines in the background, and so we'll kind of pick up and continue with that as we move forward. I still have not created the next set of cards. I have been researching them. I have been sort of just working towards planning the next set, which will be the Five of the Cosmic Gateways Tarot. I've also been working on some side missions and things like that, so it's coming up together a little bit slower than I would like, but we'll get there eventually. Obviously, because we have about 38 cards or so to go. Not 38, 36 cards to go. So we're going to be on this project for quite a while, but I'm going to be again working on the vines in this background. Now I put together my reference for this particular image in Affinity Photo as well as Clip Studio using the 3D models, and we're just going to sort of follow the right side, or sort of the left side, I should say, the left side of this image to create sort of a double sort of symmetry situation, where again I'm using that symmetry ruler to paint on one side so that it shows up on the other side. So I hope you guys are having a good week this week. It's been a very interesting week. I actually was debating streaming today because, you know, I get a little tired, right? Have quite a few things going on in life, just sort of living and sorting through things, and you know, working on goals and those side missions, and you know, all kinds of stuff is happening sort of in the background of my life. So I wasn't real sure up until last night, and I just kind of decided from there to go ahead and stream. So I'm going to take this out. There we go. So shout out to PL. I hope you guys are doing well. If I miss you in the chat, I hope to see you say hey. So if you guys have been watching sort of social media lately, there's been a little bit of a debate based on a video that Tabitha Brown produced and created, sort of geared towards entrepreneurs, with the sentiment that sometimes you have to do what you have to do so that you can do what you want to do. So her message was pretty much like, if business is not working out for you right now, it might be time to go and get a job, right? That's sort of the sentiment, and I'm paraphrasing her words just to sort of get us to where we're going, right? So with that, there have been, I don't know, it's been kind of polarizing just watching it and witnessing it. On one hand, you have people who are feeling like they understand, you know, they agree with it, that makes sense perfectly. And then there's another side of that where people are like ready to burn this lady at the stake. And I think it's very interesting, again, just to sort of watch that conversation play out, because we all, those of us who are familiar with Tabitha Brown, she's a very beloved woman. She always comes off very sweet, very kind-spirited. I like her. Right? I like her. Not that it matters, because, you know, she's doing her own thing, but I like her, and I enjoy sort of watching her content when it comes across my, you know, my pages and things like that. But when I was watching this particular video, I understood both sides. I agree with her, right? As someone who has had 2 businesses, this is my second. I started my first while I was in college, and had worked full-time while I funded that particular business, went through all the motions until it got to a point where I had to shut it down. And then I began my freelancing career several years later, So as my second business. So I understand where she's coming from, right? Because I've been on both sides of the track. One with working a job and working full time and doing that to support the business. Hey, PL says all over social media. Yeah, I've been seeing it a lot. So I guess for me, it's sort of exploring both sides of the coin. I think sometimes, I think there's a lot of things happening, right? There's a lot of things happening at one time. So from my personal background, I started my first business in college, but I was also working my first design job. So I was working like a full on, I think it was 8 to 3:30, 9 to 5, if you will, a whole 8 hours, 40 hours a week, full-time job, while I was also building a business and sort of working through and learning and all of that. And again, I've also been on the other side of that, where once I stopped working a full-time job, and for circumstances that I won't get into here, but began to freelance, I had to sort of navigate a slightly different space where you now are responsible for, you don't have that cushion from that full-time job, so you have to make something work. So with that, the opposing part of this argument is that people are pretty upset. They're feeling pretty triggered by it because of our current economic situation, right? Which I am also a part of. In that, people, myself included, have noticed, and most entrepreneurs are sort of going through this, especially if they're like solo entrepreneurs, especially if they have not gotten to the financial threshold that they would like to go into, are actively looking for employment, so that again you can use that income to subsidize whatever's not going right with the business. But with that, you have a group of people who are like, okay, but we trying, right? We're trying. The job market is like not what it used to be. Things are not looking up, and it feels like you, Miss Tabitha Brown, are picking at us for, and I don't think that's the case. I really don't think that was her intention. I didn't even take it that way. I can see how people have taken it that way. I can see both sides again, but that's sort of the argument. Your audience are entrepreneurs, and we're trying, and we're actively looking for employment. We're actively looking for ways to support ourselves while we follow our dreams. Why are you beating up on us? Right? That's been sort of the sentiment, just in a nutshell. Now you guys can go and check out that video. You can kind of see some of the comments and see some of the conversation around this particular topic, but I think it's very important, right? Now with that, I think though the message is a solid one, and I wholeheartedly agree with it. Sometimes you got to do what you got to do in order to do what you want to do. I think it's a matter of the timing, right? Because I feel like if that message was delivered in a more healthy, more affluent economic state, people wouldn't feel so triggered by it. People would not feel so upset by it. People would not feel like you picking on us and we trying, right? Even though, again, I don't believe that was her intention at all, because she later came back and kind of clarified her comments and things like that. I think people were bothered by the tone of it. I think people were bothered by the fact, again, that everything is really, really difficult. So here's what a lot of entrepreneurs, myself included, tend to sort of run into, especially at the very beginning. Now, me, I've been in business for a very long time, but as a business owner and sort of jumping into business both times, the first time, which was a product-based business where I created natural shampoos, because at the time those were not available. So I found my pocket in that space, and I created a product and researched and did all of the things, and got it to a place where I was actively selling it to my ideal customer, my potential audience. It happened. I did that for about 5 years before it became very apparent to me that it was maybe it was a timing, I don't know, but it was not a profitable endeavor. So I had to make the very difficult decision to shut it down, right? But in that, I didn't have anyone to say, this is how you run a business, right? I didn't have anyone to say, these are the things that you have to do. These are the ways that you can get into a Target. These are the ways that you can get into a Walmart, or these different, larger corporations. This is how you move your business from a business to consumer, directly to the consumer structure, to a business to business where you're selling things wholesale. So in that particular experience, I was learning a lot of things on my own, right? So that's something to take into consideration. consideration. And a lot of entrepreneurs are learning how to be business owners on their own, right? A lot of the cases, and I'm not going to say for everyone, because there are people out here absolutely killing it, right? They're like doing wonderful for themselves. They're, 6-figure businesses, and they're, woman led, or, all of these wonderful accolades and things like that. But for the average person, and I think for the person that Tabitha was addressing, a lot of that is learning things on your own. And with that comes the idea that sometimes you don't know what you don't know. Right? So you may not know how to, set up your taxes. You may not be able to afford for legal representation. You may not be able to afford to hire someone to do different services, such as what I offer, which are the graphic design and illustrative services to a lot of small businesses and small business owners. So you may not know to do that. You may not have the resources or sort of the knowledge base or the person that you can reach out to and ask certain questions to. Now, of course, now we're living in the age of the internet where everything can be found on the internet. But again, you don't know what you don't know. So sometimes it's a matter of not knowing what to look for, right? Not having the sort of time, the space, the energy to actually evaluate your business. Not making excuses for people, but that is a thing, right? Sometimes you just don't know what you don't know. The other part of that is because a lot of businesses are sort of catering to the consumer, right? It's a bit of a trickle down effect. So if we're all sort of noticing there's this shift in our economy where people are having a very difficult time just paying for the cost of living, right? That's your groceries, that's your rent, the essentials that we need to sort of move forward in our day-to-day life. Those people don't have the disposable income to purchase art prints, right? Those people don't have the disposable income to purchase hot plates or, clothes from your boutique or whatever the case is. And so it trickles down. So there are reasons, right? There are reasons why so many businesses are struggling in this particular time. There's also, going back to not knowing what you don't know, there's also a need for a shift of trying to aim for bigger clients, right? But if you don't know how to get in that market, you don't know who to talk to, you don't know how to get your products in your Target or in your Walmart, and I say Target because I think that's where a lot of Tabitha Brown's products are. And I ain't beating up on her because, again, I agree with her message, right? But to get in these larger stores, sometimes you don't know how to do that, right? I take myself as an example, right? With the first business that I owned, I had no idea. So it was me literally I always think about Master P when he was talking about how he started No Limit Records and he was selling CDs out his trunk. I was very much slanging shampoo, not out of my trunk, but at festivals and different events and stuff like that. That's sort of how I was able to gain sort of that, just the local following with my particular product. I wasn't making enough to be able to travel or take that gamble, not even in my full-time job, in addition to the business that I was running. So again, it had came to a point where I had to step down. That happens. So a lot of people are really, really triggered by sort of her comments. And I think some of it may have been in the tone that she was using, but it was Tabitha Brown. It was the way that she tends to speak when she's delivering a message that, you may not be ready or willing to hear. I think that, again, timing was against her in this particular conversation because so many people are having such a hard time just sort of making ends meet, whether they have a business, whether they're in a job, and jobs are so scarce. Which is crazy, right? So I'm not one to follow sort of the local news or politics or anything like that, but I am actively again living through this particular situation where I am someone who in my business have noticed over the past couple of years, I would say maybe even since the pandemic, a shift, right? Again, going back to my primary clients being small business owners and independent creators and things like that. People who don't necessarily have enormous budgets to begin with are also finding themselves in a place where they're having to sort of prioritize how they spend their money, right? And so the priority isn't necessarily to hire a professional graphic designer or illustrator to do what they need to do to get them started on their journey of creating their business and putting their products out. And I empathize, right, wholeheartedly. So that's certainly a valid position to be in. So from the pandemic 2020 prior to, business was pretty steady. I traveled a lot because I did a lot of conventions. So I would subsidize services with actually being active in convention and festival spaces like that, so that I was able to sort of get out and amongst my target audience, right? Now, since the pandemic, I would say that for first year 2020, we had some sort of assistance and things like that, so it wasn't really bad. It gave me an opportunity to kind of slow down from focusing on working for other people and sort of going into the dream project, right? So that was the year that I really was fully invested in creating the Cosmic Gateways Tarot. 2021, because people were now becoming very familiar with the Cosmic Gateways Tarot, I was getting lots of traction in terms of offering services and being able to provide services to other, again, small businesses and independent creators. Worked out fantastically, right? So it seems like, okay, 2020 slowed down quite a bit. 2021 is picking back up. So things are getting a whole lot better. 2022 came, and I remember I had a couple events that I did exceptionally in, because I was amongst my ideal client for this particular project. I was not ideal clients, but my ideal customer base for this particular project. So I was kicking ass. Right? So 2022, I was like, okay, it wasn't great. Like the year was fluctuating up and down. So there were great months and there were not so great months. But 2022 was okay. 2021 was far better. I also wrote my first book 2021. So like I was on my way up, right? 22 came, there was a dip, and then there was a rise back. And then 2023 came. I was probably the busiest I have ever been. However, in that, I was also the most underpaid that I had ever been. So I was taking on lots of projects, and I'm starting to sort of look at the structure of my business at that time, and deciding how I would like to proceed, how I would like to price myself, because I undercharged significantly. Right? I was charging maybe like $250 for like a t-shirt design. In very, very small, and not small, I guess, is relative to your economic situation. But for me, as a person with so many years of experience, I was undercharging big time for the entire year of 2023. But by, I would say, about September, October, I started to notice a shift, right? So again, we're going back and circling back to the way that things were 2020. So where I was starting to have lots and lots of clients leading up to about September of 2023, we started to decline, and sometimes that's sort of expected, because toward the end of the year, small businesses and big businesses too are sort of wrapping things up with their financials and sort of getting ready for the new year. So I expected a little bit of a slowdown around November, December, but for me it started in October. I have legit not bounced back. And that's just me being very transparent as a business owner from September, October of 2023. So I've been in this space of, okay, let's evaluate, right? We have this business. This is our sort of client, ideal client. These are the people that we typically service. I'm recognizing that I am no longer able to afford to have that be my only client base. So let me learn how to reach the people that I can sort of service in a way that provides value to them, but also helps me economically. And in that, I took, classes, marketing classes. I'm using this sort of slowdown period that I was expecting to have and endure from November until, I would say, maybe March, usually when it picks back up. November into February, March. And I'm using this time to sort of reevaluate, to pivot, to figure out the next steps, so that I don't have such a difficult sort of slowdown period come 2024. I'm also thinking to myself, in the event that this doesn't happen, I may need to pick up a little design job or something. Right? I got the experience, I got the know-how, and that way I can sort of do what I have to do in order to afford to do what I want to do. So I would say from about 2024 up till May of this year, I acted 2024 not so rigorously. 2024 was like, let me see if I can apply here or there. Wasn't really keeping track of the applications. It was like, let me apply, see if I could pick something up, just so I can kind of work on pivoting and focusing on figuring out where I would like to go with my business and how I would like to succeed in this particular space as a professional graphic designer and artist. And this is me being very honest, right? This is my process. So I was like, okay, let's do that. Let me look 2024 here and there. I'm looking. Ain't nothing happening. Come January this year, I was like, okay, so I'm really gonna put in the effort, right? Really tailor each resume. I'm going to put myself out there because I've been a freelancer since 2012. So it's been a very long time since I've been in the traditional workforce. So all of this is brand new to me, right? So a lot of this back then, I think prior to 2012, which was when I began to freelance, I was able to find jobs falling out the sky, right? But 2024, I was like, okay, January 1st, we're gonna hit the ground running, while I'm also sort of balancing out, working on the things that I dream of, because again, sometimes you have to do what you have to do in order to afford to do what you want to do. So I'm like, okay, cool, gonna put in these applications. And I think I reached application number 97 before I was like, you know what? I think that my energy is best spent just working on the thing that I want to do. Now, I have the luxury, and I'm completely grateful to be able to have the support where it is not imperative for me to find something right now. But for everyone, that's not your reality. For a lot of people, that's not their reality, right? For those of you who can, lean into that support as much as you can, while you work on your dreams, while you build your business. But I am not naive enough to feel like everybody's life is like mine. I recognize that it's not. So I know that a lot of people are having a really, really hard time managing going after their dreams as well as putting food on the table. And I think that's the part that really triggered Tabitha's audience, right? Because her sentiment was like, well, if it ain't working out in your business, go get a job. And I know I'm at application 97 when I was like, look here, just say go get it. I'd rather put my energy somewhere else. But for others, I've seen people who have put in 150 plus. I've seen someone put in 200 to 400 applications just this year and have not been hired since. Now, that could be for a number of reasons. I think that people are just not hiring. I think that people are putting up jobs and I don't know if it's something that they have to do for legal reasons or what it is, but I know that people are putting up jobs. I know that people are not getting callbacks. I personally have like 16 years, almost 20 years of experience. I have not gotten one callback, right? Not a one. So that can be very discouraging. But in that, one of the things that I always express to you guys, because it's something that I personally practice, even when it's like that, right? Even when you're trying to figure out what your next move is, where you're going to get your next meal from, how you're going to pay rent, how you're going to make ends meet, make the time, even with all of that going on, right? Make the time to spend at least 15 minutes a day, if you can, doing something that you love. And I say that a lot. You guys hear me say that a lot. And I ain't just saying that because it sounds good. I'm saying that because it's something that I practice. If you do that, for me, and this has been my experience, right? It does lighten the load, and it does sort of balance out some of those stresses, right? So for me, it's Sunday every week, whether I feel like it or not. And like I said, this week I wasn't really sure that I was going to show up for Paint With Me Live. But whether I feel like it or not, me coming on here, me working on the Cosmic Gateways Tarot is something that I absolutely love, right? And that makes the days better. And here's why. And I challenge you to do it as an experiment. Here's why. Let's say, for instance, that, everything else around you is sort of falling apart. If you can find that one thing that you can sort of lean into, that you really enjoy, right? That speaks to your heart and soul. I don't care if it's walking. I don't care if it's singing. I do not care if it's drawing, if you're writing, if you're doing photography, whatever it is that you do that you enjoy, right? Whether you're making money from it or not, whatever your thing is, do that. And that will start to shift your consciousness, because you're not so focused on the things that aren't going right? Sometimes we cannot sort of help, we can only control so much, right? But you can control spending a little bit of time out the week. It doesn't have to be 15 minutes a day. It could be once a week. I do Sundays, right? For about an hour while I'm chatting with you guys. I might work on it a little bit later, but that is sort of my thing and my way of sort of balancing out and mitigating so much stress. But doing that sort of changes your consciousness. Now, you can do that and it can eventually turn into money, right? Which is certainly something that we witnessed just watching people on YouTube before it became a thing that people did for the money. We would watch people create videos and put out videos and of things that they just like doing, right? whether it was playing video games, whether it was, walking down the street and exploring their cities, whether that was, providing information or whatever the thing was. Before people were able to get paid on YouTube, people were just putting things out because they loved to do it and they didn't stop. And which eventually for a lot of people led to them being able to use that as a source of income. So do the thing that you're passionate about. Your passions will also direct you to your purpose. So a lot of times, for someone like myself, I'm in a couple of spiritual groups and things like that. And oftentimes the question comes up, how do you find your purpose? Your purpose is found through your passions. Well, how do you find your passions? Try things, right? You don't know what you're passionate about until you try things. For me, it's always been art. It's just something that I've been doing my whole life. I've been drawing my whole life. Since I was 3, that was the first memory that I have, was me drawing something, right? I always had a pencil in my hand or a book in my hand, one of the two. So I was either reading or I was drawing. So that for me became something I was passionate about. I didn't look at it as a career until I got to be about 16 or so, and I had a teacher who was kind enough to nurture me in that. And even then, the idea was that I had to go into graphic design because that was the only way that she knew that people would be successful as an artist or in some kind of creative field. So for me, the arts are my passion. I love to create. I don't care what it is I'm creating, right? It could be sewing, it can be fixing things like around my house, whatever it is, as long as I'm creating something, right? Creating a safe space for myself, creating illustrations, as long as I'm creating something, is what I'm passionate about, right? But that came from me leaning into the thing I like to do, right? So maybe you don't know what your passions are. Try different things. Maybe, you won't know until you try. You'll know what you won't like, right? So whatever you don't like will sort of lead you to the things that you do like. So that is for me one of my the things that I advise doing. Now again, we're all sort of in a real different and precarious situation. Number one, this year 2025 is in numerology, going back to sort of the spiritual aspect of this, and we're working on the tarot deck, so it kind of ties in. The number 9 is a number of completion. 2025 is the year of the 9. So what we're witnessing is a dismantling of what used to work, right? Some of it is extremely abrupt. Some of it makes absolutely no sense. And some of it we have to sort of actively work to make sure that what's on the other side of this 9 is beneficial to us all, right? Right now, things seem to be beneficial only to a certain group of people, maybe a certain individual, right? Who is sort of making all of these executive decisions. So it is our job as people who live within this space to actively work towards this new beginning that's going to be happening here very soon. So we're watching things that used to work fail, right? We're watching people, within careers like teaching who can't keep up with because the attitudes of the students are so very different from what they used to be, right? And so you have that going on. You have literacy rates that are failing. You have all of these different things that are sort of happening all at the same time, right? While we're all trying to figure our own lives out, while we're all trying to sort of get to a point where we're making ends meet. And then we have someone who many of us look up to tell us, well, if it's not working in that thing that you're passionate about, go get a job. But there are no jobs, right? So just to tie that back in, that's sort of where the opposition is coming in at. So again, I think a lot of that had to do with timing. Just wasn't the right time for that particular message, and maybe not necessarily that message, but maybe the tone in which it was delivered, right? So again, I can kind of see why people were upset about it, but I wholeheartedly agree. Now, with that, I think the triggering word was job, because again, there are no jobs. But what that could mean is, if business is not working out for you, for my fellow entrepreneurs out there, if it's not working out the way that we thought it would work out, based on the way that our lives were set up, based on the way that the world was set up at a particular time, it is time for us to learn the pivot. All right, we have to kind of figure that out. So for instance, for me, again, most of my business, my very first business was business directly to consumer, right? With the freelancing, it was both business to consumer as well as business to business, because I would offer portraits directly to people who are commissioning portraits, but I also do design work for very small businesses, and I'm talking about like new, just got their business license businesses, right? But it never really occurred to me to look into aiming higher still being able to service those very new entrepreneurs, those solo entrepreneurs, those independent creators, but simultaneously reaching for those larger corporations, just so that the art can get out to get out to more people, I will say. So one of the things that I looked into, I want to say beginning of this year or end of last year, was licensing, right? So licensing is an avenue that we as artists can take in order to sort of have that residual income come in while we work on other things. So what does licensing means? Licensing means that I create this image, the Four of Wands. And with this image, I rent it out to Hallmark, right, to make cards. Or I rent it out to Great Value, right? Or I rent it out to TOR Fantasy. I'm looking at some Robert Jordan books off to my right. So I rent that image out, or rent that sort of phrase out to a different company. They are able to use it for a certain amount of time, and I'm able to get residuals from that thing. That is one avenue that we can take, right? Another avenue is to try and figure out how publishers are getting, and I'm talking to larger publishers. Of course, these publishers have been around for, decades and decades. But seeing how you as an independent creator, if you're creating a book or a tarot deck or whatever it is that you're doing that can go into a larger store, how do we get that as an individual? How do we sort of make that deal? Who do we talk to do that? So that is the pivot. So rather than reaching to the individual, or sort of focusing our attention on the individual consumer, which we can still do, we're also learning how to go a little bit higher than that, right? So we can get out to more consumers, so that we can get out to bigger businesses. If you're a designer, maybe you are like me, who was working with a lot of small business owners. Maybe it is, let's start to reach for these larger corporations who can afford right, to pay you not only your fair rate, but on time, hopefully, right? And that you can make enough money to sustain yourself, so that you can afford to help those who are not able to, pay you full price of your worth, or whatever that case is. So we're learning to sort of pivot, and we're being forced to, I would say. We're certainly being forced to do that, forced to rethink how we operate our business, what sort of services or products to provide, and where you fit, right? So with a business, I think a lot of times, because, if you're like me, I had a job and I got tired working for somebody else, right? So it was always very imperative to me to have ownership of something, to be able to get to a place where I can afford to support myself as whatever it was I was doing, whether that was my very first business where I was selling natural shampoos and conditioners and things like that I was making myself and formulating myself, and I really had it going on, right? Or whether or not I'm doing my artwork, doing my books and my tarot decks and whatever it is product I decide to offer. I have to sort of figure out what niche, not necessarily niche, I don't know if niche is the right word, but what sort of pocket within that space I can feel, right? What need am I meeting? What value am I offering to the people who I want to buy my services, who I want to buy my products? Now, with my first business with the natural shampoos, that was around 2000. I think I started that company 2007. And I started it because I had cut my hair off. I was natural 2005. At that time, that was not a thing, right? People were not going natural. It was not a thing at all. There was really no market for it. It was not a very popular thing to do. I was sort of one of a few, and we were scattered out across the country, right? So within that space, there were no shampoos. I remember going to one of my stylists at the time, or a stylist at the time, and I asked her, I was like, hey, do they have like shampoos and hair products that I can buy that don't have a ton of chemicals in it? She's like, well, no, the best thing I could come up with was Cream of Nature. I was like, okay, cool. So I started to do research, and I found ways and researched different products and different ingredients and things like that. The know-how of making something that was clean, that I could put my name on and be proud of, that I could make and enjoy for myself. So I was making my own shampoo. Came to make my own shampoo, and at that time I was still in college, and so in one of my graphic design classes, I had a professor who assigned us the task of creating a product and designing the packaging for it, designing the sales pitch for it, and sort of getting it prepared to present as if we were working in sort of an office, and this is the thing that we're creating, this is what we're selling, this is how we want it to look, this is how we'll go through all of these motions. So I was like, well, you know what? I make my own shampoo, right? And I didn't think nothing of it. It was just something that I did because that's what I needed, right? That was the pocket that needed to be filled in my life. So I was making my shampoo. I created the packaging. I did my presentation. I was like, yeah, I make my own shampoo. This is the thing. This is how I do the packaging, this, that, and the third. Did the project. And it came to me, I was like, well, you know what? Since I make this for myself, maybe I can kind of offer this as something that I can sell for other people. So I did that. And that project, because we had to actually create the physical item and everything. So we had to create the physical product. We had to create the packaging. We had to put it together, the whole thing. That project, I ended up leaving at school. And I left it at school. But I was like, well, you know what? I think I'm going to make this a business. And I'm going to really look into like making sure that this follows whatever labeling rules and FDA rules and whatever I needed to do in order to produce something that was quality, that I would be proud of, that would sell, because there is a need for something very natural, all right, that'll cleanse your hair and get you right and do all of that. So I went through the motions. I started my business. I designed my packaging. I designed all of my copy for that particular product. I designed my website. I designed business cards. I had a banner, and I was working it, right? Again, going back to remembering Master P, the rapper Master P, talking about how he was slinging CDs and tapes out of his back trunk. That was me. Right? I was at and it was locally, because again, I was working full time, so I couldn't necessarily afford to travel a whole lot, but I could afford to do local events. I would do festivals, same festival every year. I would do like farmers markets, and I would do different events and things like that, so that people can get acquainted with my brand. I had regular customers. I would go and drop off the products that they would order from me. I would ship nationwide. So once I sort of got to a point where I had an established website, I was doing photography. Beautiful. What ended up happening with that business is that, and I think it was connected to me leaving my project at school, there was another company that came about shortly after I had started selling my products full time. This company was a lot larger than, of course, me. It was just me, right? This company was a lot larger than my company. They could afford lawyers. They ripped my packaging design. I mean, down to, I used to do it in a certain color bottle, down to the certain color bottle, the label, the whole thing. They had pretty much ripped my entire design. But you could say, okay, well, bottles are bottles, and everyone has access to those bottles. Very true, right? Very, very true. But what got it for me was, one day I was watching TV, and this particular company had a commercial, and they were using my copy, meaning the information that I provided on my website, for their advertisements. So I was jacked. Right? Somebody had taken my hard work and was profiting off of it, and I was just little old me. I couldn't afford, and I was getting calls. Like, that was the most heartbreaking part, I think, for me, was not even that they had. Not just that they had stole it, because they had, but the fact that I was getting calls from family who was like, hey, we saw such and such and so and so. Can you, what's going on with there? Why are they using your words? Or we saw them say that, and their product looks like yours, and sort of having those comparisons. And so, but that happened. I stayed with it for a little while longer. I, continued to put passion and love into it, and continued to build an audience, until it just got to a point where it was like, okay, this isn't working. So let me end this here. That was one of the hardest things I've ever done, because I had put so much love into that particular business. But it had to be done, right? It was not sustaining me, right? Financially, I would say it was not sustaining me financially. And so I just had to walk away. I was still working, right, full-time job, but I just had to sort of let it go. So that happens in business. Sometimes you have to know when to let it go. Now, had I stuck with it for another year or two, right, maybe even repackaged, maybe even rebranded, and sort of gone through that process, because now I have a larger company who is clearly watching me, who is clearly sort of using the information that I'm provided for their company. Had I just stuck with it a little bit longer, because timing was also at play, because again, natural hair wasn't a huge thing at that point, I probably could have made it a very successful business. I probably could have gone further with it, but I just knew that at that time, financially, it just didn't make sense for me to do. So I got into freelancing, and with freelancing came a whole nother sort of bucket. I don't want to say a bucket of worms, but just another sort of bit of learning that came along with that. A lot of that had to do with pricing, right? So how do you price your work? When I was working for, the companies that I was doing design work for, of course, they handled all of that. I was just getting paid to design, right? Didn't have to worry about it. But when you're freelancing, everything falls on your shoulders, right? So you have to sort of make enough to be able to support yourself, to be able to pour back into your business. So you have to sort of go after clients or charge a certain amount of money that sustains that. For me, because I don't know if it was just because I was unaware of how much I should charge at that time. I was also not feeling super confident as a freelancer. Of course, I was good at what I did, but I just didn't feel confident in the business aspect of it. Having gone through a business prior to that point, I undercharged significantly at the beginning. I would do logos for like $50. You know what I mean? I was doing full scale 16 by 20 portraits for like $100. I wasn't making any money whatsoever at all. Till it got to a point where it was like, okay, maybe I should sort of get a little more serious about this, figure some things out, and pivot. And so it's been sort of a journey of pivoting and, again, finding your pocket all of these years. Right? Just recently, again, within the last couple of years, I would say, especially 2023 moving forward, I was learning a lot more about how to tighten up my contracts, because there for a while in my freelancing career, I was uncomfortable with presenting contracts, and that bit me in the butt real tough, because if I don't have a contract to enforce, then I don't have to get paid, or at least that is the sentiment that I had experienced with a couple of my clients. I didn't feel like they had to pay me. I didn't have a contract. It was my word against theirs, right? Now, of course, if we had to go to civil court or anything like that, I probably would have won, because I had the proof of conversation and, of course, the work that I had completed for them. But I had to learn how to sort of stand up in that space, right? I had to learn how to price the work. I had to learn how to, again, express value. And how am I helping my clients? How am I helping my customers with whatever product or whatever service it is that I'm offering? So us as entrepreneurs, whether you're an entrepreneur in whatever field you're in, right? Whether you are, plumbing, whether you are working on cars, whether you are a chef, whether you own a restaurant, whether you own a boutique, whether you're a creative entrepreneur, whether you're a videographer, a YouTuber, whatever it is your thing is, you have to figure out, where do you fit in a person's life? What value do you add? So that is something that we can do. Now, again, going back to Tabitha Brown, her sentiment was, if it's not working out, you have to sort of pivot and find a job, a hustle, a gig, or whatever the case is. In this particular day and age, that is a little more difficult to do than it may have been a couple of years ago. But within that space, regardless to where you are, again, you want to focus on, where do you fit, right? What part of the void are you filling? And you want to make sure that whatever you're doing, you actually enjoy it, because when you hit these bumps in the roads, when you hit this sort of period in time where nothing's clicking into place, right? Not the business, not the job hunt, where nothing's sort of working the way that you would have wanted it to work, or the way that you wanted to, play out. You sort of have to be doing something that at least sustains you emotionally, right? Something that at least sustains you spiritually, because that's going to carry you through. I promise you. Because if you're doing something that you only half like, and you only doing it because you thought that it was going to get you to a specific economic state, but it ain't something that you are totally passionate about, those dark days are going to be brutal. Right? They're going to be brutal. But if you're doing something that you absolutely enjoy, right? If you're doing something that you are passionate about, just keep going. Right? Even if you have to pick up some shifts with DoorDash, even if you have to try to get on at your local Trader Joe's or wherever, whatever you got to do to be able to afford to do what you want to do, you want to make sure that the thing that you want to do is the thing that you actually want to do, and not necessarily something that you want to do. Hey, Bob. And not necessarily something that you want to do just because you heard that that's where the meal ticket is, right? Because again, when it becomes dark and it becomes very difficult, it's going to be brutal on you, right? All right. So, been running off at the mouth here. I've been talking for 45 minutes. So let's get into this. Let's get into this vine that I'm painting. And Bob say, hey, Bob. Yeah, I know I'm talking to the people though. Yeah, I'm talking to them. Okay, well, I tell him you say hey. Okay, you doing all right? All right. All right, so right now what I've done so far, I've just kind of did a little bit of piddling on this particular vine. I'm going to add in some shadow here. Hey, okay, I'm going to add some shadow, just sort of picking up the color that I laid down earlier, just so that I can begin to kind of flesh out this particular look. Now again, I'm using the symmetry ruler so that I'm able to do something on one side and it shows up on the other side so that it makes life easier for me, right? So I can continue to enjoy doing what I want to do, right? So that I can don't have to do this twice, which is going to save me a whole lot of time. Now, when I was setting up this particular composition, I kind of show you some of it is symmetrical, right? So some elements of it are exactly the same. They mirror each other from left to right. And I'll point those out to you. So of course our 2 pink bushes here, I was been working on that for the last few live streams. The vines are the same. They sort of mirror each other, and everything that's going to go on behind the vines are going to be symmetrical, right? Our pillars that we're going to turn into our wands, those sort of mirror. So I only have to do one part of it in order to get that background done. The big cluster of leaves, right? These both sort of mirror each other, so I'll work on one side and I don't have to necessarily work on the other. That's going to help me out a lot. But in order for me to get like a fully fleshed out image that I'm very happy with, right, that doesn't feel too stiff and too symmetrical, I added elements that kind of throw off the balance just a bit, right? But they throw it off in a way that everything kind of makes sense. For instance, I have this area, and I'll show you in our reference. I have this area within our image, our reference image, where we have these real pretty red flowers and like the dark foliage around it. None of that's symmetrical, so that's going to be really, really nice, as well as the canopy that's up under it. So that's going to sort of add some fluidity to our image, where otherwise when we're using this sort of symmetry ruler, things can tend to feel a little bit not safe, but a little bit stiff, right? So what I want to do before I even get to anything that's off symmetry is I want to go ahead and flesh out everything that requires the symmetry ruler. Now I do have it on a separate layer so that I can turn it off and on. And so if I want to do something or tweak something that's not within this symmetrical space, I could do that. But my goal is to go ahead and do that. So once go ahead and work through the symmetry process so that once all that's done, I can just turn it off and it'll be done with it, right? So really, really happy with the way that it came along. Now, of course, again, these bushes down at the bottom did take a long time to do. It did. And again, I kind of set myself up for that. I wanted it to feel a little more fleshed out than some of the landscapes that we've been working on throughout this series over the last few months or so, because again, if I'm doing a landscape in the abstract, I tend to have a little bit of a tougher time making that look the way that the way I can kind of see it in my mind, or the way that the reference is set up to look. So anytime that I can actually draw in the leaves and draw in the flowers and do the petals and all the details and things like that, I guess because too, to me that's related very similarly to portraits, which I do really well with too. So anytime I can actually like draw the thing as opposed to drawing the implication of the thing, I tend to do a whole lot better in that space. But one of these days, so we had a poll that went out recently, I'll say. Had a poll where I asked you guys what sorts of videos you would like to see. And so I watched it over the few days, and I know tutorials was winning there for a while. I know that for a minute, tutorials and professional advice for creatives was winning, right? And then what was the other option? Oh, the time lapses kind of pick back up, and so right now the time lapses are winning. But I know that I've had some actual expressed interest in doing some tutorials. So maybe what I would really like to do is show you guys, and I've talked about this once before, I would like to show you guys how I go about studying for a new skill, right? So let's say, for instance, I am learning to do landscapes, and I'm learning to get better at landscapes, I would like to show you guys how I plan to go about doing that. So as artists, for you guys who are artists or becoming artists or practicing art, or it's your hobby or your whatever, your passion, whatever the case is, but you want to get better at it, I'll show you sort of the steps that I take to sort of get better at a particular skill. And so I think that will be interesting. I think that'll kind of fall in line with the tutorial aspect of things. So we'll do that. We'll do a little bit of something like that over the next couple of weeks. One of the things that I've been sort of, and I guess that's been part of what I have been sort of side missioning, right, is planning out some of those tutorial videos and sort of figuring out how I can teach you guys, because I know that we have quite a few people who watch this particular stream who are learning digital art, or who are wanting to learn and get better with digital art. And so I want to be able to, sometimes I think when we do things for a long time, we sort of take for granted certain aspects of it, right? So it may not, I think when we had Lee and Sam on recently, the last time I think, Sam asked if I was using a stylus. It didn't dawn on me to explain it, you know what I mean? So because for me it's second nature, so I want to be able to really take it back to the beginning, to the very basics, so that for you guys who are interested in learning digital art, no matter what program you're using, whether that's Procreate on your iPad, whether that's Clip Studio Paint on your desktop, whether that's Krita or Photoshop or whatever it is that you are creating in, want to be able to sort of help you sort of navigate that space. So I am actively sort of paying attention to how I do things so that I can explain it to you, right? So I do a little bit of that explaining throughout these live streams when we do the Paint With Me Live, where I'm explaining sort of what I'm doing on screen. But I really want to tell you more about why I do that, right? Or how you can do it. And not necessarily so that you guys can mimic my particular art style, but so that you could take that skill and flip it and remix it and put your own seasoning on it and create your own work. So I have to sort of, and then maybe I might even be overthinking it a little bit, right? Which definitely could be the case. But I want to make sure that that I can provide value for you guys in that aspect as well, so that you can be digital artists, so that you can create and tell your story through your artwork, because I think that's really important, right? Again, we're sort of watching this collapse of society where the things that used to work no longer work, right? Where great example for me, coming into business, as an example, some of the art, specifically with this tarot deck, I did not have anyone I could go to ask, hey, where do you get your cards printed? Right? I tried, but I was not able to successfully do that. That could be in part because the people I was asking may not have seen the message. That's a possibility. The people that I was asking may not be responsible for that aspect of their tarot deck. So some people go to publishers and they may not know, right? Or it could be a matter of people gatekeeping. Gatekeeping, I think, has its merits and it has its place, but I think that doing that is sort of getting us back again to that Tabitha Brown conversation where because people are gatekeeping their resources, and they don't owe it. I don't want to say that they're doing that and there's something wrong with them gatekeeping it and they should share because they know. I'm not saying that at all, because they don't owe that to anyone, right? But my stance is, if I know something that can help you in whatever you're trying to figure out, right, I can give you that information. It don't cost me nothing. It don't cost me nothing. It does not threaten anything I got going on. It does not hurt me whatsoever one bit to share those resources where I can, right? Now sometimes, and I know sometimes I get a little sidetracked, so somebody could ask me to do something, and if I don't do it right away, or if I don't put it on the to-do list, I'll forget. So I don't want to, if I've done that to anyone, because I know that's just how it goes sometimes. It's not you, it's really just me being super busy and not thinking about it. But if you guys are wanting to know something that I have experience with, right? Of course, again, being a professional graphic designer and illustrator since 2008, which is when I got my very first design job, and when I made my I got paid to do my very first commission outside of graphic design. So I've been in this for a very long time, and I've bumped my head more times than I can count, and I continue to do that, but to bump my head from time to time. But I do that understanding that those mistakes will just make me a better business owner, will make me a better designer, better illustrator, just better overall. So if I can help, because it doesn't help anyone for me to gatekeep, right? It don't help me out at all. It doesn't help you guys out. So if there's anything that I can do to provide information for you, just let me know. And you might have to remind me a couple times. But just let me know, because gatekeeping is not helping nobody right now in certain aspects. Now there's certain things that should be kept, you just keep it to yourself, right? Certain stuff should be like closed practices and all that, keep that. But in terms of like learning how to run your business, learning how to color and shade, in digital artwork, learning how, to get grants and learn grants and stuff like that. If I can help, if I have the experience doing so, I don't mind sharing that information. Again, what was working before is no longer working, and we're watching those systems sort of be dismantled, and it's forcing us to pivot. It's forcing us to help each other. It's forcing us to barter, right? In a lot of cases, it's forcing us to do things that we otherwise would not have thought of because of the comfort of the way that the world was run at one particular time. This discomfort, right? This very uncomfortable space that a lot of us find us in should be a catalyst for you to say, okay, this is real uncomfortable for me right now. Let me figure out, one, why it's so uncomfortable. What's triggering me about this moment? For the people who were triggered by Tabitha Brown's comments, for example, why am I triggered by this? Why is this bothering me so bad, right? So we have the opportunity right now to set ourselves up for a better tomorrow, right? So we have to sort of have patience with ourselves. We have to sort of show grace and have mercy on ourselves. And we have to get in there and pivot, right? We got to find some real creative ways to make things work now. This is where we are. And I don't think things are ever going to go back to exactly the way they used to be. I think there's always going to be a sort of change in the atmosphere. And I think for me personally, I feel like it all started 2020, right? So in 2020 here again, things shut down, the world changed. We sort of had to change the way we operated, and some things have not gone back to the way that they were, and they won't go back to the way that they were, right? So in the space, in the climate that we're in the heaviness that a lot of us are feeling, under the stress that a lot of us are experiencing, with the businesses and the passions that a lot of us are pursuing, we're going to have to find new ways of being successful, or we're going to have to redefine what success means, right? It's not going to mean the same thing today as it did 5 years ago, 6 years ago, right? So we're going to have to do a lot of reevaluating, a lot of self-reflection, and a lot of moving forward, right? Can't stay in the past. We cannot stay in the past. We cannot afford to stay in the past. So we have to figure out ways of moving forward. Again, leaning into your passions. So even when you're stressed, right? Even when, you got bills stacking up in the mailbox, even when that car break down, you know what I mean? Even when rent is due, even when all of these things are going on, even when your kids don't understand that mom and daddy are struggling right now, but they want to spend time with you, you sort of have to make time for yourself to be able to do the things that you're passionate about, because that's a way of filling your cup up, right? So you can't pour into others. You cannot fix problems. You cannot evaluate things if you're constantly in this survival mode, this jittery, I got to figure it out right now sort of mentality. Is never going to kind of come, well, it might, but it's going to be very difficult to come together with you. But if you can find things that you can lean into that you actually genuinely enjoy, right? Make the time to focus on that. That's going to help everything else balance itself out. I promise, because that's been my experience, right? So I would love to hear from you guys where you are in this. If you heard Tabitha Brown's video about entrepreneurs getting a job, what are your thoughts on it? Again, I agree with the sentiment. I think the timing I think the timing and the tone were the issue that a lot of people took with it, because of just where we are collectively. I don't think anyone needed to hear it in that particular tone. I think that for a lot of entrepreneurs, it's become apparently obvious that we need to find another source of income in order to keep the passions and the businesses and things like that afloat, but they're just not available right now, right? And sometimes, in just sort of the sentiment that was expressed on the opposing side of in the part that was opposing her point of view, was that it just felt out of touch. right? But again, I agree with it. I think sometimes you have to do what you have to do in order to afford to be able to do what you want to do. But in the meantime, while you're figuring all of that out, just make time to do the thing that you want to do, right? You have to make time to continue it, because even when you get a job, even when you get a gig, even when you do that, it's always going to be something else that's going to keep you from pursuing that dream. So in this stagnation, in this sort of time where we're at a standstill, in this time where we're all trying to figure it out, take this time, right, to self-reflect, to self-evaluate, and to dream big. Okay, this is the time to do it. Think of the pioneer days of YouTube, where people were just putting out the things that they were passionate about, which eventually led them, a lot of them, to become paid from those videos, right? To be able to use YouTube as a source of income. This is that time, right? So this is the time for us to sort of lay the foundation, to plant the seeds, to sort of work towards something bigger, and to continue to work on that, right? So even with all the stuff that's going on, continue to work toward that, even if it's once a week, right? Even if it's 15 minutes a day, even if it's like, once a month or so, whatever it is, those tiny steps that you take toward that goal, those tiny steps that you take towards those passions and working into that, is going to make a world of difference. And I would wager to say it's going to pay off, right? Now, I might be a little delusional about it. I don't know. But can't nobody tell me that this work that I'm putting in and pouring into, and all this love that I'm giving the Cosmic Gateways Tarot, is not going to pay off in some way. I just believe that in my heart, and there's nothing that can sway me for that. So you have to sort of have that sort of belief in yourself and belief in the process that is going to help happen to you as well. But we just sort of have to get real creative about how we define success and how we reach that success from here on, because what used to work is no longer working. All right, so it's auto saving. I ain't get a whole lot of work done today, but I hope that whatever message was in this live stream reaches the person that needed to hear it. And thank you all so much. PL, shout out to you. I see you in the chat. If I missed you guys in the chat, whether you're watching this live or the replay, thank you so much for watching. Now, do let me know in the comments, for those of you who are watching the replay, what do you think about, if you haven't seen it, sort of go back and look, because it's been all over the internet. But just kind of go back and listen to Tabitha Brown's video, and let me know your thoughts, because I'm really interested in it. And tell me some of the things that you're passionate about. If you have something that you want to work on and you want to come on here and talk to me about it, I would love to hear about it. I would love to encourage you in that. I would love to be a witness to your growth and to your success. So please do let me know about that. And if there's anything that you want to see on this particular channel, let me know as well. And until next time, hit that thumbs up button for me. That helps a whole lot. If you want to see more, hit subscribe. And I'll see you guys on Wednesday. Peace.